Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Kelly Schaefbauer. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, great to be here.
It's great to have you on the podcast. I'm very excited to interview you.
Like I said, it's great to be here. I enjoy these sorts of managerial leadership and operational conversations. So whenever I can, I take advantage of them.
Great. Well, I would like to also thank Diane Menser for introducing us and for this great opportunity to interview you. Okay, Kelly, let's go over your bio. So you have over 32 years of experience working with small businesses in the realm of managerial leadership. And you believe that clarity in requirements align confident teams you can trust.
I do. And I think that the key point in there is starting with clarity around the work that's necessary or requisite before we start diving into other aspects of the business. I think that's an area that's just too often overlooked. Especially by small businesses. My sweet spot are those businesses trying to reach their first million.
Okay, good. Excellent. So let's talk about that. So you say when you have trusted teams, everyone can focus on their strength.
Yeah, again, it comes back to an understanding of structure and how structure can really serve an organization. And when we start working with a business owner or their management team, we start looking at that breakdown first and make sure we're accounting for all of the requirements that are necessary for that organization, and then start bringing the people in that can function at a high level on each of those. So we're really trying to align the people and their talents to those requirements that we are starting with in the beginning, so that we have that alignment.
Okay, good. So let's talk about the 6 managerial leadership practices that are important. Let's start with the first one.
So the first is really around the idea of that structure part of it, to break the organization out into its various functions, and we call it a task inventory. So we start with really laying out that work and identifying the outcomes that we need through the work, and then organizing that work into a structure and a hierarchy. People don't think of those hierarchies that much as something that you would use in your day-to-day. But we start at a high level grouping, we call business units, and then we break those down into departments, and then we break those down into functions, and then ultimately into tasks. So we start with that, just identify the requirements of the work first into something that we call our task inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first one.
Good. What about the second one?
So our second then is, and the remaining 5, and this is really the power of our methodology and our solution. The remaining 5 leverage off of that structure. So we've now identified the requirements, and now we can start applying people to it. So the second is identifying and the people that will fulfill those roles, and how will we start holding people accountable for those assignments of work. And so that's, once we do that, we have clarity around who's responsible for what.
Okay, good. So any advice on that, on how to go, what's the best practice and how to go about it?
Well, the first thing is in creating those role descriptions, we just leverage off of that task inventory we created first. And before we start plugging people in, we start getting real clarity around what's the process that is going to be for each of these tasks we've identified? What skill sets do we need for each of these tasks? And then, what benchmarks? We can even start thinking about how we're going to evaluate performance for that. And then we have a better way of plugging the people into that as best we can. And that starts us sneaking up into the next practice, where it's documenting process, which is something that sounds, looking at your background, is something near and dear to you. So at that point, then we're looking at, all right, how do people do this work? We've now identified what the work should be within each of the departments of the organizations. Who can do it? Now it's how is that work going to get done? Through a breakdown of the tasks. Now we broke down the organization to the task level. Now we're going to break down the tasks to how we execute that work. Through the first level, we just call them tasks, or we break those down into the task, and then we're hopefully getting to steps. That's the next part. We break the task down to steps, and then we get more granular even the next step. So there's a progression here. We started at the organization, right? So now we're breaking it down: organizations, business units, departments, tasks. And now when we're getting into the process part of it, it's steps and then detailed instructions. So we have a kind of that breakdown and hierarchy of defining work for it.
Right. That's exactly right. So then what's the next step?
So next we look at, we've identified the required work. We've determined who can do it. We've identified how it should get done. The next part of it is, how do we monitor if that work is getting done to benchmark? So we do, we just call it performance monitoring. It can be your KPIs. So we align, we use the idea of leading and lagging indicators. So I kind of took you through that hierarchy of business units, departments. So that really aligns really well with leading and lagging. We look at the task as the smallest unit of work that we would measure. And, we'll look at how we would want to do that with, again, identifying KPIs, and then what benchmark should they be at. And we help businesses come in and do reporting. I consider myself, the title I say is I'm a business analyst. When people ask what my title is, that's where I think ultimately it lands to. We first have to know what the work is, how it should get done, now to what level, or how do we monitor that work is done according to our expectations for it.
Right.
On that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very important. And then, okay, so step number 5.
So that is now, we've called it a few different things along the way, but the best right now is education and development. How do we develop the skills of the people to perform tasks that have been assigned to them? And now we have this really nice architecture and laying that what that looks like out to them. In step 2 there, we created those role descriptions. Now we can start looking at a way of evaluating their performance on it. And again, we have a solution that ties all this together. So when we do role descriptions in our solution, we can start evaluating for each of those tasks that's assigned, because that's simply what a role description is. We've aligned the requirements of work we've determined to the role description. Now we need to start looking at to what performance. Right. So we can look to them and say, all right, on this task for this person, we can simply say they meet expectation. Or we can say, we trust them to do it. Or are they an expert? Or no, we don't know if they can do it at all. We call it unproven. So, we do have a system that does a lot of this that we're talking about, and we can customize the way the business owner or the management team wants to label those things. So then once we've identified, their capabilities, what tasks can we trust them in? What tasks are we not sure, or we know they can't? And then we create a training plan based on that task inventory that we just created for that individual on a team. So that's really that 5th one, is how we really elevate people's performance into expertise on our teams in a very methodical, aligning it to the required work that we determined earlier.
Very good. And now we have continuous improvement.
Yeah, so that's our final practice. And that's really our management team. We take management, that title of manager, very seriously. We look at it as we're not just going to assign somebody the title of manager in a department just because we don't want to think about it or worry about it. I think that happens in those small businesses too much, where the business owner's very busy, they're handling all aspects of the business, they're juggling, and they're just like, I need to just offload something to somebody else. We take a much more structured, logical approach to it and look at each assignment of a department. That person has responsibilities, specifically around these 6 practices. They have to make sure that they've identified the required work through that task inventory, that they've hired the right people into it, they've documented the processes, they've looked at performance and monitoring on a weekly, monthly, depending on the hierarchy and the leading and lagging. And then at the end of the day, we have to always be improving. So the final practice is to bring that responsibility in a coordinated manner to our management team. And we look at, again, back to theory of constraints. We break down within a particular process, what's the slowest part of it? And then try to fix that one. And that's a cycle. It's never ending. There's always going to be a slowest, lowest, weakest part of any process that needs to be evaluated and addressed. So we typically do that on an annual basis. We try to make it an event with their management team. I facilitate that. And we're bringing in all those other elements and aspects to that annual exercise to really improve each department, to make the parts of the whole raise the whole altogether.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's talk about process documentation. What's the importance? Why is it so important for companies to document their processes?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is to get everybody on the same page. I think especially if you just look at a department, and again, my world being these businesses that have just broke through startup. They're kicking butt, they're working 12 hours a day, they're doing everything. So they have this level of internal understanding in their head about doing work, but it's something that they haven't been able to communicate to others. Entrepreneurs are notorious for being awful communicators. And so we did a survey of 12 different business owners that were in that, startup going through, we call it, getting through that next phase of their business. And they all struggled with defining or developing teams and to assign work to people properly. They all struggled with that part of it. And so we've tried to systemize it to where it's logical, we all understand it, we can communicate it, and it's through that process of documentation. And documentation is not something, and I'm preaching to the Pope here, it's not stale, it's alive. We have to be looking at it, and is it accurate still? And have somebody on your team doing it differently? And that's okay. Let's share that. Let's collaborate and bring that back to the department and let's discuss it. But let's do that in a very coordinated manner. The manager should be aware of and connected to the people on their teams. I look at that stuff that I'm saying is all, in my world, the tactical stuff. There's 2 parts, I think, to management. There's the interpersonal side of things, and then there's the tactical side of things. I am 100%, the German in me is all about tactical. I like process and I like to see how the work can get done in the best manner. But I think there's another element that we're not really talking about. It's the interpersonal side of things. But I think the 2 go hand in hand in that. So I think good communications will improve and have better documentation as it evolves.
Absolutely. What are some of the tactics that you use in order to foster accountability?
It goes back to that, 4th practice we talked about, monitoring performance. So it starts with, oversight and, doing metrics. Part of it you can just feel and see and observe, but I'm a big believer in aligning your metrics to your tasks, into the functions in a department, and being able to look at that hierarchy. I mean, we look at an org chart and it has a lot of different purposes. I think people way undervalue what the org chart can do for your business. It's not just a place to place people. It's the architect of your entire business. So, when we look at metrics, we look at how work at the front line is compiling and aggregating up through the organization all the way to profit. We can break down every aspect. On the client service side of the business, we call it the capacity factor. What's limiting your business right now? There should be one metric, maybe two, depends on how diverse your deliverables are, that really dictate how much capacity you can provide at any given point with your team, with your resources, your technology, all those sides of things. So that's the one key metric. I'm more of a operations, client services side mindset, but then there's the flip side. Somebody's got to be creating demand for it, right? So what are your metrics there? We have a hierarchy of metrics there. The phone calls that's coming from a database, that's coming, how many proposals did we give? So there's leading and lagging all on both sides of this thing. And so I think that's where this performance monitoring can become practical. And it's not just a thing for the business owners to look at the end of the year. It should be, we look at trying to give metrics that are daily, the front line, for sure. We're looking at those weekly, monthly, as we look at the departments aggregating of the whole. And then a business owner quarterly should, a business owner shouldn't be look at the daily metrics, right? Quarterly, maybe monthly makes sense. And especially in that smaller business, that 250K, they're typically looking day to day. They're looking to see how much cash is in the bank, typically, right? And what's coming in from stuff they've built. But I think as those organizations mature, that business owner should be looking at metrics more monthly, quarterly, for it.
Understood and agreed. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think they should actually look at it. The metrics should be looked at on the regular intervals, like very closely, in order to make the right decisions. That's for sure.
100%.
Okay, good. Good. Well, Kelly, if people want to get a hold of you and know more about you, how should they do that?
LinkedIn, I think right now, I love that as a tool for connecting with people. It's very low entry. Or you can email me. If they email me, I will connect with them. And my email address is Kelly, Kelly, at aligned, ALIGN MP, and then .com for it. So
awesome. Well, Kelly,
but I'm
thank
easy
you so
to find.
much.
There's not many Kelly Schaefbauers on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
That's the easiest, and then we would progress that from there.
Absolutely. Kelly, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being a guest. And thank you for listening.
Pleasure's all mine. Like I said, whenever I get a chance to talk about this stuff, I take it. I enjoy it very much.
Very good. All right. Well, take care, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.